people a chance to log on. We've had an overwhelming response to today's webinar on International Peace Day. We have a number of special guests with us who I am eager to introduce to you, but we will give people just another minute to sign on. One second. Okay, people are coming on. Thank you everybody for being here. I'm very excited. Let's just give one more minute. My name is Shiri Orion. I'm the Executive Director of the American Friends of the Parent Circle. For those of you joining us for the first time today, welcome. The Parent Circle is an organization, an Israeli-Palestinian organization, made up of 600 bereaved Israeli and Palestinian families, all of whom have lost a loved one to the conflict, and all of whom have chosen a path of reconciliation rather than revenge. And we are joined today with a number of guests who have joined a similar path, and I'm going to introduce you to them. Today, we're having this webinar in honor of International Peace Day. Today is actually two important days. It's International Peace Day. It's a United Nations marked international holiday. Today, the United Nations says that we must celebrate peace by standing up against acts of hate and by spreading compassion, kindness, and hope in the face of the pandemic and as we recover. I also want to acknowledge that today is the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. So for many of our participants and for some of our panelists, this is an important holiday. So Chag Sameach to you. And it is actually fitting because on Sukkot, we are asked to welcome the stranger. And we are asked to be inclusive and thoughtful of people who may have had a different experience than we have. So I'm going to introduce our special guests today. All have lost a loved one. All have chosen a path of peace, and we're here today to find out, what does that take? What does it take to choose that path? Why that path, and what does that mean for you, and what does that mean for people around you? We have joining us today Joe Barry from England. Hi, Joe. Joe is the bereaved daughter of the British Member of Parliament, killed in one of the biggest attacks in the history of the Irish Republican Army, the one that was meant to kill the British Prime Minister at the time, Margaret Thatcher. Joe started an organization called Building Bridges for Peace. And it is inspired by her journey with a man named Patrick McGee. He was the man who was responsible for killing her father. Welcome, Joe. We have with us Andrea LeBlanc. Hi, Andrea. Andrea lives in New Hampshire. Andrea lost her husband, Bob, in the September 11th attacks. Her husband was on board the second plane that was flown into the World Trade Center. And Andrea almost, I think, immediately joined the September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows, an organization made up of family members who all lost loved ones in September 11th, but were united in a response of nonviolence. Alan McBride joins us from Northern Ireland. Alan's wife, Sharon, was murdered by the IRA in 1993. Alan now runs the Wave Trauma Center in Belfast, a cross-community survivors organization. And last but certainly not least, we have two members from the Parent Circle. We have Palestinian Najwa Sa'adeh from Bethlehem. Hi, Najwa. She's a bereaved Palestinian mother. She lost her 12-year-old daughter, Christine, in 2003 when the Israeli army opened fire on their car. She's a longtime member of the Parent Circle, and we're glad to have you here with us today, Najwa. Yuval Rahamim, our Israeli co-director of the Parent Circle, he's a bereaved Israeli son. He lost his father, Avraham, in 1967, serving in the Six-Day War. Yuval was only 8 years old at the time. He's been a member of the Parent Circle since 2010. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I think most of our participants have now had a chance to log in. I think what we want to hear from everybody here first, what unites you is that you've all chosen a path of reconciliation, a path of peace, but that path has looked very different for all of you. And it looks very different for all of our members of the Parent Circle as well. And it's often, reconciliation is often a word that we just, throw out there. But it's helpful to understand what it really looks like. And so, Joe, I'd like to start with you, if you wouldn't mind. Can you tell us about the day that you heard the news about your father and what sort of knowing, a lot of people talk about something they knew in the moment and how that has, evolved since then till today.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor today on this very special day to be with you all. And I first just want to send my love and heart to the new members of the Parent Circle, because I know the last few months have been very difficult and challenging. So way back in 1984, my father was killed, and I didn't just lose my dad, who I was really close to. I lost me that lived in peacetime, that didn't have an enemy, and I almost had to reinvent myself. And 2 days later was my decisive moment. I went somewhere in London that meant something to me, a church, and sat in a pew, and it came to me, if I can find a way to bring something peaceful out of this, if I can bring something positive, if I can even understand those who killed my dad, then that's going to help me. There was a choice. Do I stay a victim, go for revenge, become bitter, and have an enemy? Or do I find a way to change that story? And it was a journey that I started with no map, no direction, no idea what to do, but I trusted that somehow life was going to give me the experiences to go on this journey. But I'm 27. I'm not very emotionally intelligent. I don't know what to do with the amount of trauma I'm feeling. This is before, the internet. And the IRA was so demonized at the time that I knew I wasn't going to hear what their real motivation was by reading newspapers. But somehow I knew I was going to find a way. And it's been a very long journey. And the idea of building a bridge, which has been the theme, came very, very quickly when I ended up sharing a taxi with a complete random stranger. And turned out that this random stranger, his brother had been in the IRA, and his brother had been killed by a British soldier. So this is the height of the war. We should have been enemies. We represented different sides. And yet we spoke of a world where peace was possible. And I left that taxi, the words came to me, I can build a bridge across the divide. And even though no one knew, I felt like I started to make a difference.
Thanks, Joe. And then you met the man that was actually responsible for killing your father.
Yeah, I did. So we finally had a peace process where people came together and started negotiating. And part of the negotiation was what was called the political prisoners released from prison. And I remember one day turning on the TV, and I was absolutely shocked to see that the one person held responsible for killing my father and for others was freed and coming out of prison. And my first thought was, how is this possible? It's not fair. He's got the rest of his life back, and my dad can't come back. But then I thought, this is for peace. This means less people are going to go through what I and thousands others have been through. So I welcomed this. And the idea then came to me, maybe I can meet him. And I saw it as a one-off meeting, and no one would ever know. So I didn't tell anyone, just him and I sitting together. And all I wanted to do was look into his eyes and see some humanity. because he was the most demonized terrorist we had at that time. And I thought if I could just see some of his story, see him as a human being, that was going to give me something back. But that first meeting changed because he started his own journey of realizing that he was guilty of demonizing the other the same way that he would accuse the other of demonizing him. That's the nature of violent conflict. And he began seeing my dad as a human being, and he was open to hearing the impact on my life of what he'd done. So we started a journey together, and that's now been 21 years. And it's been a transformational dialogue. We've shared platforms in many places, including Israel and Palestine. And I haven't seen him so much recently, but we've spoken in many different arenas. But I met him not to change him, but to change myself. And that's always my motivation. And what I've learned through being in dialogue with him has, I think, been phenomenal. And in terms of my own violence, my own need to make someone wrong, and also my capacity to understand empathy and my capacity to feel compassion and even love and to make a difference in the world. It's given me, it's opened doors for me. And I don't regret. I mean, there have been challenges and hardships and some difficult times, but I don't regret ever my decision to meet him. And I met him because I trusted something in me that I thought was going to make somehow help heal me, and it has been healing me.
Wow, it sounds like it really empowered you, Jo.
Yeah.
I'm sure that people will, just from what Jo said, I'm sure people will have lots of questions. And I didn't mention that we will be taking questions and answers. So if you'll put your questions in the Q&A box, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to put in questions now, and later on we'll have a chance to ask your questions to all of the panelists. And Alan, for you, it was different. Your experience was very different than Jo's. Can you tell us what it was like, your reaction was like when you learned that your wife had been killed, and what has changed your experience then, which I understand was a more anger-filled response, which is valid, of course, to where you are today?
Well, yeah, so my wife was murdered in 1993 on the 23rd of October. So next month will be an anniversary. And that particular day, it was a nice day, a sunny day, and I was out on my bike. And I got home and I got the word that there was a bomb in the Shankill. And I think, having grown up through the Troubles, as I did, that's what we call our conflict, the Troubles. Sort of don't mean to trivialize it by putting such a simplistic name on it, but that's what it is locally referred to as. But having grown up through those dark days, you just get used to the violence, I guess. I think one of the big sad indictments really of living in a divided society that has a lot of conflict, I suppose a bit like Israel and Palestine, you can get used to there's just always going to be violence. You never really live your life without it, and then you get immune to it, you get numb to it. So when I got the call to say that there was a bomb in the Shankill, and I went down to see if Sharon was okay, she worked down there in her father's fish shop business. I didn't think for a minute that there was anything wrong, or that there was going to be a bomb or whatever, because as I say, I was immune to all of that. But when I got down and I saw where the shop was, and it was just a pile of rubble. And I suppose then in that moment, your life just really, well, for me, I suppose it kind of finished almost. I wasn't sure what to do. I can remember the days and weeks that followed. I couldn't go back home. I had to stay with my sister-in-law and her family. I slept on their couch for a while. I mean, I was 29. I'd never really been on my own ever. I went straight from my parents' house to being with my wife, Sharon. And then this was the first time that I was completely on my own, or at least I felt as though I was. And I couldn't do it. So yeah, the feelings, I suppose, came much later, when I started to think about what had happened and how I was left. And there was a story in the paper at the time, and I'm actually still in touch with this little girl called Emma Anthony, whose father was murdered by the IRA. and they put a bomb under his car, and killed him. But he was taking his daughter to nursery that day, who was only 3, the same age as my daughter. And I could see this little girl's photograph. So that's really what angered me. The fact that, her father was killed and she was in that bomb, even though she was only 3 years old. She was the same age as my daughter. And then I thought about my daughter, and I thought about that, she was going to grow up now without her mother and all of that. So all of that just, I guess, immobilized me to go and to try to campaign or highlight or do something. I mean, I was never a violent person, so revenge was never something I ever thought about at all, but I wanted to do something. And I started to do some volunteer work with a group called Families Against Intimidation and Terror. And we highlighted the IRA and UVF and Loyalist Republicans, wherever they were holding events or whatever, we were there with our placards and all of that. And a very personal campaign aimed against Gerry Adams, who was the leader of Sinn Féin at the time, and he actually carried the coffin of one of the dead bombers who was killed at the scene. And I had a very personal campaign aimed against him, which went on for many, many years, actually. Just so that I guess that's how I dealt with my anger. I just kind of channeled it into campaigning. But in those days, I suppose, and this is where it's very different to Joe's experience. I mean, it wasn't really about peace and reconciliation. It was probably for me a way of channeling the anger into something. I mean, it's not to say that I wasn't interested in peace and reconciliation. Of course I was, but I just didn't see how the IRA and Sinn Féin could ever really change and be part of it, I guess. When you've grown up with nothing but violence your whole life, and then all of a sudden, you're expected to believe that this great war machine was going to be something very different. I suppose it's a bit like what's going on at the minute in Afghanistan with the Taliban and people, and I'm not comparing the IRA to the Taliban, by the way, although I dare say there are some similarities. So it's just that, can a leopard ever change its spots, this kind of thing? And can you ever really, trust them to do that? Mm-hmm. So yes, it was quite a journey, and I mean, obviously, I don't want to hog the conversation now. You're still doing your introductions, but there's lots more to tell about how I came out the other end of all of that, to actually meeting Gerry Adams and then working constructively with the Republicans and others for a better future. But I think initially I had to go through that period of being angry in order to come out the other end. So I don't regret it at all, to be honest. It might sound a strange thing. And I see it in so many other people now as well, when bad things happen, and I see the stance that they've taken. And I don't point the finger, or I wouldn't ever criticize. I think people are all where they are, and there's very few people can go from being that hurt and that damaged to overnight to being one of forgiveness. I mean, I know Gordon Wilson, who was a great statesman here. He lost his daughter in the Enniskillen and is quite often held up as an example of people who can lose. He lost his daughter in the Enniskillen, and on the very evening of that, he was talking about forgiveness. And there's big question marks about how you can go from that to that so quickly, and whether or not it's genuine or. So there's all sorts of reasons. I mean, I'm still on a journey. It's been 20 odd years now, 25, 26, 27 years, something like that. And I'm still on a journey,
Yeah. And I think what you're saying about anger being an important part of your journey is helpful for us to hear, because it's a good reminder that the process is not static. It's not like, you're either going to be an angry person or a peaceful person. Things can change. There is opportunities. And for those of us that are doing work to change people's minds and change people's hearts, that's very helpful to know that an angry person can go to be a peaceful person. And we'll get back to you, and I want to hear more about sort of what changed things for you. But Andrea, I'd like to hear from you. You said when we talked that one of your first thoughts was about the Afghan mothers after hearing about your husband's death. Can you share with us your experience about the day you learned about when Bob was killed?
On that day, it took some time, in my case, hours, but for some people, days and weeks to find out what happened to the people that they presumed were hopefully still alive. And they searched and searched. And Bob being on one of the planes meant I saw when he died, you know, and, you know, who knows? I think reactions, emotions just happen. And I remember one of the very distinct first thoughts I had was knowing that our country would retaliate, and they would, and very soon thereafter, you know, there was a lot of war talk, et cetera. And the hopelessness, the frustration of feeling like I couldn't do anything about it. You know, it was profound. And, you know, I knew my husband well. He taught geography, was a student of humanity, if nothing else. And he would have been the person that all of us in our family would have gone to understand what was happening. And he celebrated the other, you know. So it was like all the doors and windows had been slammed shut, and I had no access to a way to understand. 20 years ago today, on the International Day of Peace, was his memorial service. And my daughter, who was then 30, got up and said to this crowd of people at the university, I know my dad would not want another person to suffer because of what's happened. And I thought, that kid was listening, you know. In any case, I was not one of those people who was, if I was angry, I was angry at our country. And there was an immediate coming together and caring worldwide. And the Parent Circle was the first group that reached out to 9/11 Families for Peaceful Tomorrows. So there's a long history here, and the Japanese as well. And it was profoundly important to us, but people ask all the time, still ask, did 9/11 change the way, you know, bring you to the peace movement or whatever? And I think to a person, even though I'm sure many people in Peaceful Tomorrows, members of Peaceful Tomorrows, were initially very angry, they didn't seek revenge. They immediately looked outward. And it was with enormous relief to find this group of people who understood, because many people I thought were my closest friends were angry with me that I wasn't angry. And it took years for me to sort this out. Walking on a peace walk in Japan, where I didn't have many people to talk to because I don't speak Japanese, gave me a lot of time to think. And I thought, you know, maybe they're right. Maybe there's something really broken in me that I wasn't angry. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that whether you're angry or you are in despair, those are emotions that just happen. And I didn't choose that. I didn't choose 9/11 either, but it's what you do with it. And you can either live in that anger or live in that despair. In either case, you've ruined your life, or you can make another choice. And to me, that was a huge revelation, that I had a choice. And I didn't choose not to be angry. I didn't choose to be, you know, I was despairing about humanity. And that was just my reaction. And to me, finding people like all of you in the Parents Circle and Joe Barry and numerous other people around the world who have made this other choice of not turning our pain and despair into more pain and despair has been enormously important, but I think important for the world.
Yes. I think that it's so true what you're saying. I mean, there's so many things when you're growing up in violence, like Alan was talking about, and in Israel and Palestine, that you can't choose, right? That we have no control over. And so having control over something really gives you like a sense that you can actually make a difference, or you can actually have authority over your own life, or agency over your own life. Well, I want to come back, Andrea, and hear more. First, Najwa, I want to hear from you. You were with Christine when she was killed. For those of us that joined late, Najwa is a Palestinian bereaved mother from the Parents Circle. She lost her daughter, Christine. You were there when it happened. It must have been a terrible experience. And yet you've been able to channel your grief. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, it was really very terrible night for us, for me, for George and Marianne, when we were driving our car in Bethlehem. When we reached beside the Shepherd's Hotel, we saw 3 jeeps without army jeeps without soldiers. And we thought it was a normal checkpoint, because as usual, they can enter anywhere in the West Bank. So George, my husband, he continues driving the car when we start hearing a terrible shooting at our car. So we didn't saw any soldiers, but we think that Christine, she saw, because she started telling us, Mom, Dad, I saw them, they are shooting at our car. So I told her, we are innocent, my dear, I don't think they are shooting. Unfortunately, they were really shooting at our car when they injured my husband and my 2 daughters. Christine, she killed at the spot. George, he had injured at his back and at his tummy. Marianne at his knee. Then I started screaming for the Israeli soldiers to help us, but they didn't allow for the ambulances, Palestinian ambulances, to help us, to take us to the hospital. After about 20 minutes, they bring for us a ambulance, soldiers' ambulance. They took 4 of us to the northern checkpoint of Bethlehem, where they were prepared for us 3 ambulances. 2 ambulances were very intensive for George and for Christine, and the other for me and for Marianne. So they took us to Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem, where they took Marianne and George for a surgery. And there I know that Christine, she was killed. So after that, after about a month, we had a call from the Parents Circle. They told us to join them, and because we don't have hatred in our hearts. Me, George, and Marianne, we went to meet them, and we meet with them, and we started telling our stories. Each one tell his story. And me, George, and Marianne, we joined the Parents Circle since that time. And we are working together to reach peace, one day to reach peace and justice in the Holy Land between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
So inspiring, Najwa. I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm so sorry for everyone's loss.
Yes, we know it is very sad for us to live. It is, very, very hard to me as a mother to live with the memories of Christine. Since her death, I get, changed a lot, even with my behaviors, with my friends. It's very hard to lose your beloved one, especially kid, daughter or son. It's very hard. So we are working in Parent Circle because we don't want any other mothers to get hurt the same like we are.
Yes.
And to suffer the same what we are suffering from.
Yes, to prevent any further bereavement.
Yes, and to try to stop this bloodshed between each other. Yes. To reach peace one day. We hope to reach peace one day together, to live in peace together.
Yes, we all hope. Thank you, Najwa. Yuval, you were a young boy when your father was killed. You were 8 years old. Tell us what it feels like to be an 8-year-old boy who found out that his father had been killed.
Well, unlike my other colleagues who hear me well, unlike my other very inspiring stories, I was only 8, so I didn't have the emotional vocabulary to even understand what just happened. I mean, nothing bad was registered in my memories. I mean, I was not able to even understand what just happened and that I'm not going to see my father anymore. I think it took me years to process that. So that was my first reaction, was I think shock and just hiding it. I mean, since there's no way to take it out, it was just hidden for many years. But also, I didn't have any notion of reconciliation or peace, because that was not the discussion. And in these times, we were times of war, and hatred was everywhere. There was everything was either black or white. I mean, we hated Arabs. We just happened to have war with several Arab states, and there was no room for any compassion, for any reconciliation, for any peace thoughts. All I knew is that the Arabs killed my father, and there was nobody here to guide me, to tell me really what's going to happen next, or is there a way to make peace with that idea, or to make peace with the Arabs. So I grew up filled with anger and hatred and desire of revenge, a very childish, maybe primitive. And today it helps me to see others when this is the immediate emotion that comes up. But it was the emotion that I was experiencing for the early stages of my life as a young kid. I was really thinking of getting revenge from the Arabs. I mean, it was really simple for me. I'm going to the army. I'm going to become a pilot. I'm going to bomb the Arabs. I didn't even know them. And of course, since it was a war, there was nothing personal. There was no person who specifically killed my father. He was 41. He was not even a soldier. He was called for the reserves. He was a farmer. So he didn't have a chance even to fight. He was just killed on the second day of the war. It took me many, many years to understand and many experiences that I've been through to really give up on my thoughts of revenge and just carry on with my life. And everything was hidden, really. I'm sure that many of my colleagues here on the panel, they feel the same way, that on the fact that you have to carry on with your life. You have to show that everything is, I mean, at least carry on normally with your life, but you hide your pain. You cannot expose it everywhere. You just need to carry on. And it goes with you everywhere, no matter how young or old you were at the time of the event. At that moment, things have changed for you forever, and it's never gonna be happy. Really, I don't think you can really celebrate anything in your life anymore. I mean, it's a tough decision. Maybe some of us were able to do that, but there will always be this void inside of us that will never be completely happy. But anyway, my journey, I think the biggest shift was when my kids were old enough to start their military service. And when my oldest son, Eden, came back for his first vacations from the army, and I started to really understand the weight that he was carrying during his service in the occupied territories. Really not what my thought was for defending our country, but really defending the occupation and controlling the civilian Palestinian population. And this is at the age of 50. This is where this was the point where I decided that I can no longer remain indifferent to what's happening around me, and to take like civil action and to join some kind of an action against the conflict and to try to solve it. Because people over the years, since my loss, over decades, people were dying because of this conflict on both sides, Israelis, Palestinians, kids, adults. And for everyone who is lost, and we really cherish this loss, there are dozens of people around them that their lives are damaged, hurt in a way that they will not be able to recover. And we are those people. We are the people that have lost so much in their lives. And this loss is directed into many directions. Some of them are revenge, and some of them keep pushing these cycles of violence forward. But we must be the ones who stop this cycle. We understand the loss, and we can transform this loss to a power of reconciliation, and to try to stop this cycle on anywhere on the planet. Because for any conflict, the loss is never worth the gain.
Thank you, Yuval. You've often spoken about the people that are left behind, and how we've suffered losses. People's lives have been lost, but there are also losses to those who have been left behind. And I think probably everyone.
We've just visited a month ago the family from Bet Umar that had lost their 11-year-old child 2 months ago, and they were still under shock. But you could clearly see that the ones who are left behind, the kids, the parents, they cannot return to their normal lives, and they will never be able to return to their normal life.
I want to turn to something that's often controversial when we talk about reconciliation, which is forgiveness. Forgiveness can be a part of someone's reconciliation process, but it by no means has to be. At the Parent Circle, we do not require forgiveness is not a prerequisite for joining the Parent Circle by any means. But I think it is interesting to hear about your different experiences and thoughts around forgiveness. Joe, you're the only one here on the panel who has met the perpetrator and the person that has killed your loved one, and you're actually working with him together. So what does that mean, Joe? Does that mean that you've forgiven him? Is he repentant? And is that sort of a requirement for you in your work?
Forgiveness is a word I find really hard to use. And I don't think it's relevant to what we're talking about, unless you can really redefine what it is. I prefer not to use, I think it puts a lot of pressure on people. They have to forgive, and they imagine they can reach a space where suddenly they're not angry, they're just going to be loving and peaceful, and that's not attainable. Some days I feel okay, some days I don't. The anger can come. It's not just that some people do reach a point where suddenly they forgive and everything's rosy. For most of us, we struggle. And I don't see it as forgiveness. For me, it's about moving from an enemy, from someone who's an other, to seeing them as a human being. That's the important part. The important part is taking charge of the bit that I can, which is how I respond, how I feel, and transforming that into creating empathy and peace and compassion. And maybe the only person I can actually forgive is myself. And Patrick McGee, his struggle is that he can't forgive himself for his own reason. And he's not here to talk about his own struggle, but he would say he doesn't deserve to be forgiven. He hasn't forgiven himself. And that's the journey that he's on. I much prefer it to be about understanding and empathy. And the way that I see it is that there have been times when I've listened so much to Patrick's story and heard about some of the difficult experiences he had as a teenager. I also heard what he inherited from his parents, and I've seen that for him it took 6 months before he joined the IRA. It took him a long time to think about was it right for him as a response to protect his community. And I wondered, if I'd been born to his family, to the way of thinking, to what he saw as a young man, his experience with the British Army, would I have made the same choices? And I don't know. And in that moment, it's not about forgiveness, it's about understanding. And I've had that experience with many different sides to the conflict in Northern Ireland. I spent time with some of the amazing peace women who stayed true to non-violence. I've spent time with the paramilitaries on the loyalist side, ex-British soldiers. And it really makes me know that actually an enemy is someone whose story I haven't heard. And I can empathize with many people. This is not about agreeing or condoning, but it's about really understanding that if I lived their lives. And I've had that experience. Today I was with someone from Rwanda on a call, on a Zoom, who I met when I was in Rwanda. And we talked about some of the stories we heard in Rwanda and the people who inflicted the most terrible, terrible violence. But hearing their stories also, there's like, okay, the demonization that they went through to reach that point. And as human beings, we're all capable of doing the most appalling things in difficult circumstances, just as we can also transform what's happened to us. So it's a long answer to say that I'm not sure. The amazing people who say they can't forgive for really good reasons, and they're so compassionate. Other people say they have forgiven, and they can also be unkind. So forgiveness for me is not a measure of anything unless people want to give it meaning. But for me, it's about that empathy.
Najwa, what comes up for you when you hear what Joe just said? I mean, forgiveness for you comes from a deep Christian faith. So when you hear Joe talking about forgiveness and empathy, what comes up for you? How has forgiveness helped you?
Forgiveness, it's to stop hatred and give a chance for a new beginning with our enemy. I do forgive to reach peace, justice, and to end the violence, so that people will not suffer from wars like we suffered from. This is why I choose forgiveness. And as a Christian, I learned to forgive since I was a child. So we will reach always peace with forgiveness. If we stay with hatred in our hearts, we will never have peace. And if we didn't forgive, we will never have, if we didn't forgive for others, we will never have peace with them.
But how did you do it, Najwa? How do you forgive? How do you do it?
Believe me, I don't know. Maybe I think it is, so many people ask me this question. I think it's a grace from God. Because since I saw Christine in a pool of blood between my arms, I couldn't understand how could I have that peace inside of me. I didn't even have any hatred for the soldiers. They were surrounding us, you know. Maybe I could hurt anybody, but no, because I forgive them. Really, I forgive them. And this is my way, and George and Marianne also, as a family.
As a family.
Yes, and we thank God for this grace. Because there is so many Christian people, they can't forgive. Even my friends, they told me, how did you forgive them? So I feel it is a grace. There is peace inside of us. Only God can give it to us and to put it inside of us.
And do you think peace is possible without forgiveness?
I don't think so. Because every time, without forgive your enemy, every time you saw him in front of your eyes, you will think how to, you know, to do anything for him, to revenge from him, you know. But when you forgive him, you will, you know, you will be in peace. So this is the way, the only way we can reach peace, to stop this bloodshed between each other.
It's a big leap that you're making. I think it's hard for some of us. I know it is for me to, you know, comprehend this, but it's really something to think about, and that will, I think, sit with a lot of people for after they leave here today. Alan, you've been offered the opportunity to meet the person who murdered your wife, but you've chosen not to. The man who killed your wife was released from prison as part of the peace agreement. Tell us about that. Why do you choose not to meet him? What's been the impact for you that he's been released, and how do you make sense of all of that, or do you?
No, I mean, for me, it was very simple. And I would be interested to hear from Jo just about what other members of her family felt about the journey that she was on. And I guess that, you know, for me, I wasn't prepared to take that chance. I mean, the people that I cared about were my mother-in-law, who's no longer with us, my daughter, my family. I mean, they've just, quite frankly, would not have understood in any sense why I would want to meet the person that brought so much hurt and devastation into our home. So it was never ever going to happen as far as I was concerned. Something else that Jo said, which is quite interesting for me, when she said that, you know, she wanted to see the humanity, she wanted to meet the human being, and I think that's very good and very true, because it's so much easier to deal with this stuff if you believe that the people that murdered your loved one are monsters, because I mean that's what monsters do. They so much more difficult when you consider that they were human beings that did this, because then you have to start to struggle with the fact that one human being did this to another. And I suppose, you know, for me, in terms of coming out the other end of my own particular trauma and hurt and where I was at, was exactly that, was when I started to think about these people as human beings. And of course, when you think about them as human beings, well then, you know, they are capable of change. They are capable of, you know, of going a different way. And certainly I would have wanted to have been part of that, but that never became a sort of a do that to the people at my life. It was preferable for me to do it with the wider Republican movement, and I did go on to do that. I mean, I have very good friends now who are Republicans. In fact, I actually know Patrick McGee very well, and would have had a drink with him occasionally down in Madden's, where he would drink in the centre of Belfast. So I've also got very good friends who I've stayed in their IRA, who I've stayed in their homes and stuff like this. But I could never have done that with Sean Kelly. It's just probably too close to home for me. Could also mention, I mean, because I know that we're picking up on something that Najwa said about, you know, and she's forgiven. That's excellent, fantastic. And I have said quite openly that I've never forgiven and that Joe said that she didn't think that forgiveness was even relevant to the conversation and all of that. And I kind of wonder if we're all in very similar places, albeit at face value, it would look as though we're in very different places. One's forgiving, one's not. One doesn't care. But at the end of the day, I think what we've all done is to be able to let go of the hurt and the trauma of what happened. That's not to say that we've forgotten about it. Absolutely not, and in no way will we ever. It was hugely life changing and sort of in many ways. But we've been able to set it to the one side, and we've found the strength and the grace to do that. And for some people, that's going to be forgiveness. Absolutely. It wasn't forgiveness for me, and I have to say to you, the opposite of forgiveness might well be hatred. But we seldom exist in those two polar opposites. You know, that either we feel a sense of forgiveness and wanting to get on with someone, or we feel hatred towards them. To be honest with you, with Sean Kelly and Thomas Begley, my attitude to them would be one of indifference. I didn't know them before the bomb. I don't know them now. I have no particular desire to get to know them. I don't think about them. They have never really been they haven't become this big boogeyman in my life. If they had have been, well then perhaps, you know, I would have had to have gone down the road of maybe forgiveness in order to just to exercise that demon, as it were. But they never were. Jerry Adams was much more of a boogeyman for me, because he was a guy that, you know, okay, I'm not sure, I'm not suggesting for a moment that he planned the Shankill bomb. I don't think he did, but he certainly gave it cover when he carried the coffin of the dead bomber, and because he was a very prominent politician. And he did go on the record to say that, you know, he wasn't going to lay the blame of the troubles at the door of Thomas Begley and Sean Kelly. And I think that's right. But as a politician, I think he had more responsibility than the two young people that actually carried the bomb into the shop that day. So my real journey in terms of peace and reconciliation was actually with Jerry Adams, not necessarily with, and I have met Jerry Adams, and I did go on to meet Jerry Adams, and we sat down and we shook hands, and we had breakfast together. So that's the real relationship of reconciliation that I was on, not necessarily with the people that actually, the foot soldiers that carried the bomb into the shop.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yuval and Andrea, for you, there's more of a faceless enemy in your situations. What does forgiveness play a role for you at all? And if so, how? You can go ahead, Yuval, but you need to unmute. You're still muted. There you go.
Yeah. I think Andrea was referring to the personal position that you take when you decide to forgive. I mean, that's really claiming responsibility on your life. Once you forgive, you take responsibility back to your life and to your pain, and you can go on with your life. But there's a more social or even political aspect to that. You're right that there is no personal. It's not a personal crime, so it's not personal forgiveness. It's the conflict. It's not. My enemy does not have a face. My enemy is the conflict, and the hundreds and thousands of victims here are not personal for any side. I mean, all of them were killed because of the conflict, and both societies, the Israeli and the Palestinians, cannot forgive because they were not even presented with the possibility that on the other side there are human beings. We are still presented. The conflict is still presented to Palestinians and to Israelis as that we are the good and they are the bad. I mean, there's no middle way. There's no humanization of the other side, and this is it doesn't leave any room for forgiveness and reconciliation in terms of our society, unless we can really put human faces to the other side and show each other that there are people that are hurt on the other side, and they want peace and they want to live normal lives. We will not be able to even access the beginning of path of reconciliation and forgiveness. And this is what we're trying to do at the Parent Circle Families Forum, to bring the other side to our side, to show each other the true face of our enemy, which is a human being that is a victim of this reality. And what we're doing with the high school students, that when we come together, Israelis and Palestinians, to show them that we look the same, we talk the same, we lost the same, and we pain the same, and that for those people who see for the first time the enemy standing in the classroom, speaking in their own language about their pain, is a life-changing experience.
Right.
Because for the first time, we can see the enemy as a human being. And I think before we can, unless we do that to everybody on both societies, we cannot reach reconciliation, we cannot reach peace, because people are still stuck in the concept that the other side is the demon. And there's no way to discuss, to talk, and to negotiate with the demon. Just continue fighting with them.
So you're talking really about, the enemy as a whole, as like the other side, as a whole other population, rather than a specific person that did some terrible crime to you, which
Right.
is also an essential part of all of the work that we're doing. Andrea, anything you want to add to this conversation on forgiveness?
One thing Najwa said when she was talking brought back a memory from the big march on Washington in February 2003 to stop the Iraq War. And there were just hundreds of thousands of people, and with placards and signs. And there was a big pickup truck full of nuns, Catholic nuns. And they had a big sign, and it said, "What would Jesus do?" And to me, that's, what Najwa was saying. I was brought up Lutheran, and I'm sure my ethical standards are informed by that. But forgiveness was never a part of my thinking very much. I didn't fret over it. I know other members of Peaceful Tomorrows really found it very difficult because they felt their religion required of them that they forgive. And I thought about it a lot and came to realize that forgiveness means different things to different people. And for some people, they would say, if someone comes to me and asks for forgiveness, then I would forgive them. But until then, I don't. And it always, I don't know, for me, it seemed like it had really very little to do with the other person. It had everything to do with me. And I could choose to live with hatred or not. But if I did, I was the victim. It didn't do anything to that other person. The situation with 9/11 is all the hijackers are dead. But what was it that, how did that attack even happen, And so I wondered, who are these people that they could, what happened to them that it was possible for them to hate us so much that they would do this? In the years after 9/11, my struggle was more with understanding, like Joe said, trying to figure out the humanity there. And the real stone wall was our own government and what was happening in the 20 years of war since, and all the hundreds of thousands of people that have been directly killed or their lives destroyed, or families who are like us, living with pain that doesn't go away. People would always ask, have you found closure? Like, what on earth is that? I haven't got the first idea, and I think it's because other people want to be told that, yes, I'm fine now.
Yes.
You're never fine. You're never going to be fine again, and to me, oh, sorry, dog, I will mute it. But it's like you absorb it. It becomes part of the fabric of who you are, and it's there. So and I'm going to mute this because she's barking.
I think it's interesting about what both Yuval and Andrea are talking about, how it's not a person, it's not a specific person, it's the other side, right? It's like a whole society of people that we need to go through this process with and see them as humans. And Alan and Joe, I want to ask you to talk a little bit about that in relation to prisoner release, and sort of how, share your experience, because, the issue around prisoners is very, very sensitive, very controversial in Israel and Palestine. And yet we know from what you've experienced that it was part of your peace agreement. So sort of what would you share with your Israeli and Palestinian counterparts around a prisoner release? I don't know who wants to go first. Alan and then Joe.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I suppose the first thing to say is that we quite simply wouldn't have had a peace process if it wasn't for prisoner releases. I mean, it was very much a key element of it. I can remember when Mo Mowlam, who was the then Secretary of State, very famously went into the Maze prison and actually met with the prisoners and actually sought their advice on the peace agreement. And I mean, we had loads of peace agreements before the Good Friday Agreement, but all of them left the people who were actually fighting the war, the loyalists and the Republicans, outside of the room when it came to negotiations. They didn't consider them to be worthy of negotiation because they were the people who were waging the conflict. Now, I mean, that I suppose always struck me as being something that was rather bizarre, that you would try to build peace with people who weren't fighting in the first place, and the people who were actually doing the fighting were the people that you were never going to be prepared to sit down with. And I understand, I mean, the rationale behind that, because of course never send out a message, at least bomb and shoot your way to the negotiating table. So there's a reason why I suppose governments the world over tend not to do this. But in Northern Ireland, our conflict was protracted. I mean, it has been going on for generations, and we had to bring it to an end. And that was the way that we eventually brought it to an end. And I say that in a very guarded way, because there would be people who would argue that it is still not over today. We have had over 100 people killed since the Good Friday Agreement. And so, in some respects, the conflict continues. But if it hadn't been for those prisoner releases, if it hadn't been, for that part of the agreement, which was hard, it was very, very difficult. I mean, I had to face the prospect of the person that murdered my wife has been released, having served only 7 years in prison. But I knew when I signed up to the Good Friday Agreement, because of course we had a referendum to be able to endorse the peace agreement, I knew that to leave these people in jail would have meant that we would never have had the peace process, because there wouldn't have been a buy-in, certainly from Republicans and loyalists. So I guess I gambled, and I said yes in the referendum, and I campaigned actively for a yes vote. And I suppose, all those years later, over 20 odd years later, that we are still trying to figure things out in Northern Ireland. I feel a bit let down, to be honest with you, by certainly the lack of political progress and the lack of even empathy, or the lack of politicians wanting to go on and make this place a better place. I think there's still too much of people who think was held on to and not really wanting to let go of any of that. And so the conflict has been fought out in other ways, you know, whether it be over Irish Language Act or various other things that are being talked about here in Northern Ireland. But, you know, the prison releases were crucial to it. And I will say this on Palestine, one of the things which has happened, and as a matter of fact, very few of those prisoners that were released ever went back to violence and reoffended. I mean, many of them became community workers and political activists and, you know, set aside the guns and the bombs and worked. I mean, people like Patrick McGee, you know, worked very constructively for a better society. So, you know, I think there's lessons to be learned.
Joe, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I agree with everything Alan has said. Because I live in England, I wasn't part of the peace process. I didn't have a voice. And I think it's in some ways maybe more isolated, but also is easier because there's no prisoners being released where I live. And I know that Alan and many others had them like quite close. They were released quite close because Belfast in itself is, you know, a small town. Yeah. So there were many, many more challenges. But the big picture is what's important here. And the part that this means less people. I know 100 people are still being killed, which is appalling, but it could have been thousands more if we hadn't had the peace process. So the bigger picture is really, really important. And the other thing that Alan says that most people who released then did go into some community work, whether it was politics or making a difference, because there's a context to the peace process. And most peace processes around the world do involve the prisoners being released. And everyone has to be consulted in a peace process or it's not going to be sustainable.
I think that is very relevant to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and people always fear like we'll release the Palestinian prisoners and they'll go out and commit a crime again. And hearing you say that the prisoners who were released went into community service or some sort of peace work it sheds a new light on the.
Well, I think the key to that, Sherry, was that there was a negotiated settlement, you know, which recognised people's sense of Britishness and also their sense of Irishness for the first time, which was interesting. And so I think those people, certainly from either side, and part of the kind of I think it was actually the Achilles heel of the peace agreement, because it did come to unravel a few times actually in the following years, was the fact that it could be all things to all people. And it was very clever in that. I mean, George Mitchell, who was the architect of the Good Friday Agreement and a great American diplomat and national hero in some respects, when he designed it, of course, in consultation with the Northern Irish parties, he designed it in such a way as it could be sold to different constituencies and that people could put different spin on it. And that's what happened. So that's why I mean, it was like over 90% in the south and over 70% in the north of people that actually voted yes for it. But then whenever the years that followed and they started to realize that some of these things that people were selling wasn't particularly nailed down in the agreement, and then they started to have fallouts over things like decommissioning and various other things as well. I suppose the point I'm making is that one of the big reasons that the prisoners didn't go back to conflict was because, as far as they were concerned, the peace agreement actually resolved a lot of those issues of what they were fighting for. Of course, it didn't bring about a united Ireland, but I think it opened the door for that to happen in the future if the people wanted it to happen. And I think that was a very important point. And for those who were on the British side or the side of the Unionists or the Loyalists, they felt that they had saved the nation, they had saved the Union, you know, and it was now in their own hands. And that principle of consent, I think what it became to be known as, was very, 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 very important. One of the big issues, of course, about that Brexit has thrown up in late is that you know, it has made that more fragile now, you know, because you know, it's people now, Irish nationalists are now locked in with the United Kingdom. You know, they're no longer part of the European Union in the way that their counterparts in the Irish Republic are. And so there's a very marked distinction now between the UK and Europe. And that has raised all kinds of difficulties and issues in relation to perhaps the conflict even being, refought in some sense. There are some very real fears around that in relation to the border.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think we've been talking a lot about sort of really big pieces of reconciliation that might be big leaps for people, things like prisoner releases and forgiveness. But I also, it's important to mention that reconciliation is also made up of components that are easier, at least for me, they're easier to swallow, like recognition, things that all of you have mentioned. Recognizing the other side's narrative, recognizing the other side as human and having legitimate claims, dreams, desires, ambitions, acknowledgement of the other side, humanization. These are all components of reconciliation that Parent Circle works with every day on the ground, and all of you have touched upon. I'm going to open up to questions and answers in just a couple of minutes. So now's the time. If you have questions for our panelists, please put them in the Q&A box. A couple of things before we open up to Q&A. First, we have a special guest. Well, she's not a guest. She is a member of the Parent Circle, Robbie Damlin. She's the one that actually brought all of our panelists here today. They all have a special connection with her. And so she's very much part of this very special panel. So Christopher is going to bring Robbie on for a minute, and she has a poem that she'd like to read with everybody. And then we'll see what the questions and answers are like in the Q&A box, and we'll take it from there. So Robbie, welcome. If you could turn your video on, that would be great.
There we go, she's on. Oh, she was.
Here I am. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to you all. And I really must say before I go on, that it's people like you that I feel such a sense of solace when I have to go on with this work forever and ever. And people keep saying, how can you do it? But when I listen to a panel like tonight, how can I not? And I found this poem. It's called Revenge. And it's by a Palestinian poet, Taha Muhammad Ali. At times, I wish I could meet in a duel the man who killed my father and razed our home, expelling me into a narrow country. And if he killed me, I'd rest at last. And if I were ready, I would take my revenge. But if it came to light, when my rival appeared, that he had a mother waiting for him, or a father who'd put his right hand over his heart place in his chest whenever his son was late, even by just a quarter hour, for a meeting they'd set, then I would not kill him, even if I could. Likewise, I would not murder him if it were soon made clear that he had a brother or sisters who loved him and constantly longed to see him, or if he had a wife to greet him and children who couldn't bear his absence and whom his gifts would thrill, or if he had friends or companions, neighbors he knew, or allies from prison, or a hospital room, or classmates from his school, asking him and sending him regards. But if he turned out to be on his own, cut off like a branch from a tree, without a mother or father, with neither a brother nor sister, wifeless without a child, and without kin or neighbors or friends, colleagues or companions, then I'd not add a thing to his pain within that aloneness, not the torment of death and not the sorrow of passing away. Instead, I'd be content to ignore him when I passed him by on the street, as I convinced myself that paying him no attention in itself was a kind of revenge.
Thank you, Robbie. Thank you for all that you do and all who you are, and for bringing all of these fantastic people together here today. There are some great questions coming into the Q&A box, and I hope you'll take the opportunity when you answer the questions, our panelists, to talk about the work that you're doing today, because all of you are doing incredible work in your communities to further peace and all of the principles of reconciliation that we talked about today. Andrea, the first question came in for you, but it says Andrea and others, and I think this is a relevant question to for everybody. It says, can you speak more about your peers getting angry at you for not being angry like them? How did you prevent not becoming an other from them in the process? I think, Najwa, you could probably also talk about this, and if not, everybody talk about sort of the backlash or negative responses that you've received from your communities or families for the work that you're doing. Andrea, you want to start?
I'm not sure that I'm not sure what initiates that kind of response, but I think it's about validation. And on the other side of that, when Peaceful Tomorrow's members in the early days would speak to groups, I often wondered what there was to say that was of any value. And again, people would come up and thank us for validating what they, in their own hearts and minds, knew to be true. And yet they were being told, in the case here, that if you weren't for the war, you were dishonoring the people who had been killed on 9/11. And we were saying that's not true, and so suddenly it gave them permission to listen to what they believed, and not listen to the war cries that were so prevalent. I have no idea, but there were good friends of mine who I really was surprised at, who chose not to be my friend anymore. And it did leave me very alone for a long time. And the people that probably populate my life now are people I have met through Peaceful Tomorrows and the conference we did in 2006, where I met Roby and I met Joe and many other people. And that has become really an international network of peace for me. And it makes ultimate sense. Mm-hmm. But I think people get frightened and they need to be right. And if you say, I feel differently, sometimes that's threatening to people. I would be interested to know how people deal with this kind of thing in their own families. And there must be, it's true in Peaceful Tomorrows that all our members have not had families that are uniformly in agreement. And it's caused stress and fissures. And, so how do you stop and listen? And here these are people that you love, never mind enemy. And yet it's hard.
Yeah. It sounds like
our kids were of a mind, but I'm lucky.
Val, did you want to add something? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to refer to the beautiful poem that Robbie just read, because what we are doing is trying to show that our enemies have brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers, and this is demoralizing anybody who wants to go for war. Because if you understand that your enemy is a human being and he has a mother that will cry and a father that is worried for him, you cannot shoot. You cannot really operate your machine wars. And this is why many people think that what we are doing is really not patriotic enough, or because we're trying to to stop that cycle by humanizing the other side. And this is what's so beautiful with this poem. I never heard it before, and I think that's the answer for everybody who's angry with us for what we're doing. We're doing what we're doing to prevent our side or the other side. And what the leaderships on both sides, they're trying to block this image of human beings on the other side. They're trying to just picture that the other side is a demon. Because they know that once you see the human side, you will not be able to fight them anymore.
Is that the biggest struggle you think that Parent Circle is facing today, Yuval, and the peace community in general?
I think absolutely. I think that whenever you see a conflict, you see that the narratives are so strong, and they completely negate each other. They negate the fact that on the other sides there are victims as well. You can only see the victimhood of your side, and that continues to fuel the conflict.
And how is Parent Circle fighting that?
We are trying to tell the other story. We are trying to tell the human story of the other side. We are trying to show that the other side has the same pain as we have. And I think that's a very powerful concept.
I would agree. Najwa, tell us about some reactions that you've had in your community. Have you been called a traitor? Have you been called a normalizer? And if so, how do you handle it?
Believe me, it is not easy for both sides of us as Palestinians and Israelis, because for injustice and also what's happening now, and by occupation, and it's still opening. But that does not stop us from continuing our journey, because so many, my own friends, they don't speak to me now because they don't agree with me for what I'm working in. Because they are always telling me, don't believe that there is one day we will reach peace. But I still have that hope that one day we will reach peace. Because there is so many good people. Not all the people are bad, and there is so many good people.
Yes. Somebody is asking about a sense of solace. Is there a sense of solace by being together in your quest for reconciliation? It is hard to find like-minded people. There is a connectedness in everything you express in the panel. And I want to hear from others too, but Najwa, you've said that sometimes you feel more connected to people in the Parent Circle than people either in your family or your friends. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, that's right. Because we have the same pain. And we are the people who paid a lot, the highest price we paid. Our sons, our daughters, some husbands, some dads, mothers, and they can feel in my pain, and I can feel with their pain. This is why I believe that I always became relaxed with them. They could understand me, what I'm saying.
Does anybody else want to respond to that? About solace and finding like-minded people?
Like I said, I think it's great to be part of a big network of peace builders throughout the world. And I mean, I've really got to hear about Parent Circle through meeting Robbie, through another friend of ours, Gary Mason. So I suppose the question I have is, because I don't know an awful lot about Parent Circle, is how extensive is your network? And is it just with regards to Israel and Palestine? And I mean, I see Andrea obviously lost her loved one in the attack in New York. I mean, so is it I'm just kind of wondering how extensive is the network?
Well, Parent Circle has supporters all over the world. I mean, in Israel and Palestine, there are about 600 bereaved families, but then there are other like-minded organizations that we work with. And then there's the American Friends of the Parent Circle, and there's the UK Friends of the Parent Circle, and then there's other international organizations like yours.
So what connects people is just that they've lost loved ones through conflict, not necessarily a particular conflict. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, the Parent Circle itself is only for Israelis and Palestinians.
Okay. Okay.
But I think, I mean, there's so much that we can learn from these conflicts, right? From conflicts and from not just conflicts, but just acts of violence around the world and how people have reacted to them.
Yeah.
We have just a few minutes left. So if there's anyone that wants to say anything about the work that they're doing today, their organizations. This has been recorded. Also, if you want to find out more about the Parent Circle, Christopher is going to put some links in the chat. If you want to support our work, there's also going to be a link in the chat about that as well. I'm so grateful for all of our panelists here today, for everyone for joining us, and not just for joining us here today, but joining us every day in solidarity, because the work that you're doing we can feel it in other parts of the world. And I hope that in Israel and Palestine, the work that we're doing can be felt around the world. I know so many of you here are inspired by the work that we're doing. And so I am grateful for all of you and who you are and all that you do. Is there anything anyone wanted to add about the work that they're doing? And also if you'd like to mention or talk about what you think your loved one who you lost would say about the work that you're doing today. What would Christine say? What would Bob say? What would Sharon say? What would your father say, Joe, and your father, Yuval? What would they say about the work that you're doing today? Joe wanted to I'm going to let Joe answer.
I want to say that this increases my hope for a more peaceful world, and that's why it's so important that we all link together. And there are many networks of people around the world ending the cycle of violence and revenge. And the days when I struggle, I think of my friends Bassam and Rami and Robbie, and now Najwa and Yuval and Alan I already know, and Andrew's been an amazing friend for years, and we were part of an incredible international network. And hope to me is a form of nonviolence. And I know that my dad would understand, because I was always a bit different as a child. He'd understand that I'm wanting to create a different future rather than defend the past. And this is what I believe in. And I work a lot with children in this country who are demonized in the same way the Irish used to be. I work with Muslim girls who get attacked and who receive so much hatred. And one of the things that I do is listen. I just want to bring listening here, because we're all listeners. We all listen to others. And Najwa talks about how she feels safe with Parent Circle because they listen to her. And the listening is so important. And through listening, that helps people let go. And then when people begin to let go, then I support them in looking at how to transform their pain and their outrage into something positive. I believe this is the time when we're all positive change makers, our young people as well as us.
So Yuval, you wanted to say something.
You mentioned what my father would have thought about what we're doing. And I think my father was part of a generation that really had a complete faith in our leaders. And he was, going to the war with a complete belief that he was defending his country. And I think we are a different generation. We question and we want to change reality. And I think that he would understand what we're doing, that we're trying to take responsibility over the future. And that means putting yourself sometimes against the current and against the consensus, and just fighting for a better future. And I believe that at that point he would approve.
Najwa.
Well, you know, Sherry and everybody, before Christine's death, maybe in 2 months, she was telling me, Mama, and for me and for George Marianne, I'm going to die this year and to be very famous.
Wow.
She said it 3 times. Even she said this to her classmates, her near friends. So I feel that sometimes we have messages we don't know from where. I think it's from God to help us to continue after after our loss. So and her dream was to be a lawyer or a nun, to help the poor people and to bring justice and peace in our world. So I'm sure if she's still alive, or she's telling me as an angel she's telling me to continue our work. This is what she will agree with us. I'm sure she will agree with us if she's still alive, and she's now pushing us from above.
Thank you, Christine.
Yes.
Andrea.
My husband was nothing if not obsessed about travel. He was a geographer of maybe an old school now that had to go to places and be in the synagogues, be in the temples, be in the markets, listen to the music. He wanted to smell the smells. Didn't matter if he couldn't speak the language. And for all the years he taught, and then after his retirement, he continued to work with students in a program, a study abroad program. And he was just always encouraging our kids, our friends, his students to go and experience the world. And he loved the differences. He celebrated all the differences. And it was contagious. There were so many people, students and friends, who afterwards said that because of him, their lives opened up. You know, so I have no doubt that he would, for one thing, he would be embracing all of you. He just was a happy, peaceful person, full of curiosity. You know, there wasn't anything hateful in his body. You know, and I really think it's about education. I think it's about people hearing the stories of all of you and then realizing that there's a difference, a choice that they can make. And they don't have to live as a victim. They don't have to live with hatred. They don't have to live in despair. There's another way, another choice. You know, and without those tools, without those good stories, how do we expect our young people to even imagine a better world? But hearing all of your stories, it makes that possible. So you guys are great.
Thank you. Alan, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose thinking back about what Sharon would think, I know that her first thoughts would be to how I took care of Zoe in terms of what I did about the world. I don't. It'd be nice to. I mean, she might think that's a good thing that I've done something with the peace process and all that. But I think her primary concern would be for Zoe. Sharon was 29 when she died, and on Saturday, my daughter will be 30. So she's lived longer than her mum, and that's a big milestone for me. Sometimes when you think back to the things that, you know, the anniversaries and stuff like this, and they come and go, but these big milestones are the ones that really bring it home. Yeah. Oh.
Happy birthday, Zoe.
Yeah.
From all of us. Thank you all for being here today in honor of International Peace Day. And to everyone who's joined us here today, have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.